It was a bright afternoon at Lincoln Middle School, and the schoolyard was buzzing with the noise of kids running around, chatting, and enjoying their recess break. Among them was a quiet teenager named Steven Seagal. Unlike many of his classmates, Steven kept to himself, often found sitting under a tree reading or practicing slow, deliberate movements he'd learned from his martial arts training. Steven wasn't the kind of kid who craved attention or tried to start fights. In fact, he was known for being calm, collected, and respectful. But in the rough world of middle school, quietness sometimes gets mistaken for weakness, and that was exactly how some of the notorious bullies at Lincoln saw him. These bullies ruled the schoolyard with their loud voices and aggressive behavior. They picked on anyone who didn't fit in, and unfortunately, Steven had become their latest target. They'd watched him for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. On this particular day, Steven was simply walking across the playground, minding his own business, when the bullies spotted their chance. With a cruel smirk, one of them grabbed the garden hose that was being used to water the nearby plants. Before Steven could react, the bullies unleashed a sudden, forceful spray of cold water all over him. The crowd of kids erupted in laughter, some cheering on the bullies, others looking shocked. A few pulled out their phones to record the humiliating moment, while Steven stood there, dripping wet, trying hard to keep his composure. Despite the shock, Steven did not lash out or cry. Instead, he took a deep breath and remained calm, refusing to give the bullies the reaction they were hoping for. This moment would mark the beginning of something much bigger, something the bullies never saw coming. Little did anyone know, Steven Seagal was more than just a quiet kid. He was a martial artist in training, someone with discipline and strength far beyond the average teenager. And what he did next would change everything, forcing those bullies to run away in fear. But for now, all anyone saw was a drenched boy standing silently in the middle of the schoolyard, and the bullies laughing loudly, thinking they had won. The water sprayed from the garden hose hit Steven Seagal with unexpected force, soaking his clothes and hair. For a moment, time seemed to slow down as the cold droplets dripped off his face and splattered across the cracked concrete of the schoolyard. The bullies laughed and jeered, clearly enjoying their moment of dominance. The crowd of students around them buzzed with mixed reactions, some snickering, some whispering, and a few pulling out their phones to capture the scene. "Look at this. Seagal's all wet," one bully shouted, shoving Steven slightly. Steven stood his ground, not retaliating or showing any anger. His expression was calm, almost unreadable. His lips pressed tightly together as if holding back something far deeper than frustration. The bullies were expecting him to explode, to yell, or to run off humiliated. But Steven's silence was a powerful contrast to their chaos. Another bully, taller and bulkier than the rest, stepped forward, glaring at Steven with menace in his eyes. "What, you gonna cry now? Or just stand there like a little baby?" The crowd laughed again, some cheering for the bullies. Steven's wet clothes clung to his body, but he didn't flinch. He took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying himself. He had learned early on that losing control only gave his opponents the power. This was a test, and he was determined not to fail. Around the edges of the crowd, a few students looked uncomfortable. Some whispered to each other, questioning the bully's cruelty. A couple of teachers were nowhere to be seen, probably busy inside or assuming the situation would blow over. One of the smaller bullies suddenly lunged at Steven, trying to shove him harder. "Come on, fight back," he taunted. Steven raised his hands slightly, not in aggression, but in a way that suggested calm confidence rather than fear. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly, voice steady. "But I won't let you treat me like this either." The bullies laughed at the idea of Steven standing up to them, but there was something about his calmness that started to unsettle the crowd. They weren't used to seeing someone so quiet respond without panic or anger. Phones were out now, recording every moment. The videos would later spread through the school's social networks, capturing Steven's humiliation for everyone to see. But even with the cameras pointed at him, Steven didn't waver. He knew that real strength came from within, and the crowd's opinion wouldn't define him. "Why don't you just run home and cry to your mom?" Another bully mocked. Stephen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around at the faces in the crowd, some encouraging the bullies, some unsure, others clearly fascinated. Then he locked eyes with the tallest bully again. "I'm not scared of you," Stephen said calmly. "You think bullying makes you strong, but it just shows who's weak inside." The words seemed to hang in the air, unexpected and powerful. A few students murmured their agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably. One of the bullies, frustrated by Stephen's refusal to break, turned the hose back on, splashing him again. "Let's see how long you last without crying," he sneered. Stephen was soaked from head to toe now, water dripping from his clothes and hair, but his expression remained calm and composed. He didn't flinch, didn't scream, and didn't lash out. Instead, he simply stood tall, breathing steadily. The crowd was growing larger as more students gathered to watch, whispering and murmuring among themselves. Some admired Stephen's patience, while others eagerly awaited what would happen next. As Stephen stood there drenched and silent, the bullies tried to provoke him further. They pushed, they shouted, but he never lost his cool. His calmness was both frustrating and puzzling to them. They were used to victims breaking down or fighting back. Then, without warning, Stephen turned away from the bullies and began to walk slowly toward the edge of the schoolyard, water dripping from his sleeves and pants. The crowd expected him to run, to retreat, but instead, he walked with a quiet confidence. "Wait," one of the bullies shouted. "You're not done yet, are you?" Stephen stopped and faced them again, this time with a subtle change in his posture. His shoulders squared, and his eyes glinted with a sharp focus that hadn't been there before. "I'm done standing here being humiliated," he said. "But if you think this is over, you're wrong." A hush fell over the crowd. The bullies looked at each other, suddenly unsure. Some of the students exchanged surprised glances. Stephen's calmness was no longer just patience, it was strength. He wasn't the easy target they thought he was. The tension in the schoolyard grew thick, and all eyes were on Steven Seagal, the quiet boy who refused to break. Have you ever seen someone get bullied like this? Comment your city and country below, and tell us. What would you do if you were there? The schoolyard was still buzzing with whispers and uneasy glances as Steven Seagal stood tall, dripping wet, but unbroken. The bullies looked unsure now, their bravado slightly shaken by Steven's calm and steady demeanor. But they weren't ready to back down yet. In fact, their aggression was about to escalate. One of the bigger bullies, the leader of the group, stepped forward, narrowing his eyes. "You think you're better than us, huh? You think you can just stand there and talk back?" he snarled. The crowd grew silent, sensing something was about to happen. Students pulled their phones out again, ready to record whatever would come next. Stephen didn't flinch. Instead, he took a slow, deep breath and looked the bully straight in the eye. There was no anger, no fear, just a quiet strength that seemed to fill the air. "I'm not better than anyone," Stephen said calmly. "But I know when something is wrong. And what you're doing, this bullying, it's wrong." The leader sneered. "Words won't save you here. Let's see if you can back them up." Before anyone could react, the bully suddenly lunged at Stephen, aiming to push him to the ground. But Stephen was ready. With lightning-fast reflexes honed by years of martial arts training, he sidestepped the attack effortlessly. The crowd gasped. Some whispered, "Did you see that?" Others murmured, "Who is this kid?" The bully stumbled forward, momentarily off balance, but quickly recovered. The other bullies closed in, their confident smirks fading into uncertainty. Stephen stood his ground, eyes calm and steady, as the bullies circled him. The tension was palpable. Suddenly, one of the bullies threw a punch. Stephen didn't block or dodge like most would expect. Instead, he smoothly redirected the force of the punch, twisting the attacker's wrist and guiding him to the ground without causing injury. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers and cheers. "This is not just some kid," one student whispered. The bullies were stunned. Their aggression had met an unexpected wall of skill and calm strength. Stephen moved with quiet precision, using the bullies' own momentum against them. He didn't fight with rage, but with control and respect. Each move was calculated, efficient, a perfect balance of defense and discipline. The bullies tried to regroup, but their confidence was shaken. They glanced at each other nervously, unsure whether to continue or retreat. Stephen looked at them once more, his voice steady and clear. This can end any time you want, but you have to choose respect. The crowd held its breath. For a moment, it seemed like the bullies might back down. But then, the leader tried one last charge, desperate to prove dominance. Stephen met him with a smooth wrist lock and gently pinned him to the ground, making sure no one was hurt. The schoolyard was silent except for the heavy breathing of the bullies. The unexpected calm strength Stephen displayed left everyone in awe. If you were standing there, what would you do at this moment? Speak up or stay silent? Comment below and be honest. The atmosphere in the schoolyard had shifted dramatically since Steven Seagal's unexpected display of calm strength. Whispers spread among the students, their eyes filled with a new kind of respect and curiosity. Who was this quiet kid who had just turned the tables on the school bullies? Steven stood near the edge of the playground, still dripping from the earlier hose incident but composed, his chest rising and falling steadily as he caught his breath. The bullies, who had once ruled the schoolyard with arrogance, now looked unsettled. Their faces, once filled with confidence and mockery, showed cracks of doubt and uncertainty. One of the students, a kid named Tommy, who was known for being a bit of a chatterbox, nudged his friend and whispered loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "That's Steven Seagal, right? I heard he's been training in martial arts since he was a little kid." The name sparked a ripple of realization. Slowly, more students leaned in, their murmurs growing louder. Martial arts? No wonder he was so calm. I thought he was just some quiet nerd. Looks like we were all wrong about him. Even some of the bullies exchanged uneasy glances. They had underestimated Steven, and now they were beginning to see him in a very different light. But the leader of the group wasn't ready to admit defeat. His jaw clenched as he stepped forward, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Yeah, so what? That doesn't mean you can boss us around," he said, trying to sound tough, but his voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. Steven met his gaze with calm determination. "I'm not here to boss anyone around, but I won't let you treat me or anyone else like that again." The bullies scoffed and took a step forward, but the crowd of students surrounding them had grown. Suddenly, it wasn't just Steven standing alone anymore. It was a whole group of witnesses who were no longer willing to let bullying go unchecked. At that moment, a teacher appeared, alerted by the noise and commotion. Mrs. Johnson, a kind but firm woman who had always watched Steven with a quiet admiration, approached the group. "All right, everyone, break it up," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is not how we treat each other here." Her presence added an official weight to the situation, and the bullies reluctantly stepped back. As the students started to disperse, some still whispering about Steven's surprising strength, a few brave ones approached him. One of Steven's classmates, a girl named Maria, smiled warmly. "You were amazing back there," she said. "I never thought you'd stand up like that." Steven shrugged modestly. "I just didn't want it to keep happening." Maria nodded. "I think a lot of us feel the same way." The moment marked a turning point, not just for Steven, but for the entire schoolyard culture. The bullies' hold on the playground had been broken, and students began to feel safer and more confident. Word of the incident spread quickly through the school. By the next day, the video of Steven's calm and skillful defense had gone viral among the students. Phones buzzed with messages, and conversations everywhere centered around the quiet kid who had changed everything without raising his voice. The bullies, once the center of attention, found themselves isolated. They avoided eye contact and slunk through the hallways, unsure of how to regain their lost power. Meanwhile, Steven continued to walk the halls with the same quiet confidence as always. He didn't boast or gloat, but the newfound respect from his peers was clear. This was more than just a victory in the schoolyard. It was the beginning of Steven Seagal's legend, the first chapter in a story of strength, humility, and resilience. The days following the schoolyard incident marked a new chapter for Steven Seagal. Though the bullies no longer dared to harass him openly, the tension between them hadn't completely dissolved. Behind the scenes, the leader and his crew whispered, plotting ways to reclaim their dominance. But the once clear lines of power had shifted irrevocably. On a crisp Monday morning, the school corridors buzzed with the usual chatter, but a quiet anticipation hung in the air. Word had spread that the bullies were planning a confrontation, a final attempt to put Steven in his place. Steven walked through the halls with his typical calm demeanor, aware that eyes were watching. He wasn't afraid, but he knew the importance of staying steady and focused. Martial arts had taught him discipline and control, qualities far more valuable than anger or recklessness. At lunchtime, the inevitable moment arrived. The bullies cornered Stephen near the cafeteria entrance. Their expressions hardened. The leader stepped forward, his usual smirk replaced by a more serious look. "Listen, Seagal," he said lowly. "We don't want to cause trouble in front of everyone, but you've been making us look bad. That ends today." Stephen looked at him calmly, meeting his gaze without a hint of fear or aggression. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Stephen replied evenly. "But I won't stand by while you bully others or try to intimidate me." The leader laughed bitterly. "You don't get it, do you? This is how things work. You either bow down or you get crushed." Stephen shook his head slowly. "I believe strength comes from respect, not fear. You're wrong if you think you have to crush others to be strong." The tension thickened. The other bullies circled around, ready to back their leader, but Stephen's calmness seemed to disrupt their confidence. Suddenly, the leader lunged at Stephen, fists raised. But Stephen was ready. With practiced ease, he sidestepped the first punch, using the bully's momentum against him. He grabbed the attacker's wrist and twisted, sending him stumbling forward but without hurting him. The bullies paused, surprised by Stephen's skill and restraint. One of the bullies charged, but Stephen smoothly moved to the side, tripping him lightly and helping him back up immediately afterward. "You see," Stephen said calmly, "this isn't about fighting. It's about knowing when to stand up and when to walk away." The crowd of students that had gathered murmured in awe. The leader scowled but hesitated. His confidence was waning under Stephen's composed strength. "Give it up," Stephen said firmly. "You don't have to be someone you're not." The leader took a step back, frustrated but unable to continue. For the first time, the bullies realized that their aggression was no match for Stephen's calm confidence and discipline. The power they thought they had was slipping through their fingers. The students around them began to cheer softly, growing louder as the bullies retreated. Stephen's actions that day weren't about showing off or winning a fight. They were about teaching a lesson, that real strength comes from control, respect, and courage. The schoolyard incident with Steven Seagal had become more than just a local story. It was now part of the school's history. What started as a humiliating moment for Stephen turned into a powerful lesson in strength, respect, and resilience. Word had spread quickly among students, teachers, and even parents. The video footage of Stephen's calm and skillful defense circulated through phones and social media groups, inspiring many who witnessed it firsthand and those who heard about it later. The bullies, once the feared rulers of the schoolyard, found themselves isolated and avoided by many. They no longer held the power they once did. The respect they had demanded with intimidation had vanished, replaced by quiet conversations questioning their behavior. For Stephen, life didn't change overnight. He continued to walk the halls with his usual quiet confidence, never boasting or seeking attention. But now, there was a new kind of respect in the way others looked at him, a respect earned not through loud words or violence, but through calm courage and unwavering self-control. His teachers noticed the change too. Mrs. Johnson, who had witnessed much of the incident, approached him one afternoon after class. "You handled yourself with incredible maturity, Stephen," she said warmly. "You've taught more than just the bullies a lesson. You've inspired others to stand up for what's right." Stephen smiled quietly. "I just wanted to do what was right. No one should have to live in fear." His classmates echoed this sentiment. Many felt empowered to speak out against bullying, realizing that strength wasn't about fighting back with fists but standing tall with integrity. The school administration took notice as well, initiating programs to foster respect and kindness throughout the student body. Anti-bullying campaigns gained momentum, and Stephen's story became a central example of how peaceful courage could change a community. Outside of school, the story reached local news outlets, highlighting the power of discipline and humility in the face of adversity. Stephen's calm strength was praised as a reminder that true power lies in character, not aggression. The bullies, meanwhile, faced consequences both socially and from school authorities. They were encouraged to attend counseling and workshops to understand the impact of their actions and to learn better ways of interacting with others. Stephen himself didn't see himself as a hero, just a kid who refused to be broken by cruelty. His focus remained on training, learning, and growing stronger in both body and mind. But to everyone else, Steven Seagal had become a symbol of how resilience, patience, and calm can turn the tide against intimidation and fear. And the schoolyard was never the same again. If you believe calm, strength, and respect can change the world, type respect in the comments below. Share this story and help inspire others to stand tall in the face of bullying.